So a number of years ago, I'm 29 years old and I'm in this dingy Motel 6 in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I haven't slept that night and really haven't really slept for like probably the last 3 weeks. So I had just bought a business as a fundless sponsor, a term which didn't even exist back then. And it wasn't going well. It wasn't going well at all. It was this label printing company and it was kind of sputtering a bit. And then the recession came and just flattened the business. So we were teetering on going out of business. And then in a diving save, I had found this strategic buyer who was going to buy the business and keep it afloat. That was the good news. The bad news was we were going to have to lay off about 25% of the workforce. The reason I was up and wasn't able to sleep is I was going to do that in a couple hours. So I'm reviewing the spreadsheet, looking over the numbers, the final numbers, just seeing like we could get more severance and how we could make this a little bit of a softer landing. I had this copy of this book, true story. It's called The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And I read this book, like a few pages of this book every night because I would get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and not be able to sleep. And I'd try to like coax myself that it was going to turn out okay. So at 6 a.m., I walk into the plant. It's January in Fort Wayne. I walk in, the whole place smells like ink because it was a label printing business. And the CFO, her name, we'll call her Dana, she and I were the only two people that knew what was going on. So I kind of make eye contact with her. And then we go through what we had practiced hundreds of times, which is we brought the people into the conference room that we were going to let go. And I had these remarks prepared. Again, I'm 29 at the time, nervous as hell. And I start into my speech. I thank everyone for their work. And I tell them we tried as hard as we could. And I list off all the effort we did. And I said, unfortunately, today is going to be your last day. And I had the next part of my speech, which was talking about the severance we were going to make for them, Cobra, the normal stuff like that. But before I got into that, Dana, who had been holding all of this in for like 2 months at this point, just broke down in tears. And as did a whole bunch of other people that were sitting in the conference room, including most of the people there. So a couple of people got really angry. And then I kind of finished the rest of the thing talking about outplacement services and, that we had some employers that were hiring that they could talk to and severance we were able to get for them. And most people just kind of put their head down, walked out of the room. And just the rest of the day was kind of handling logistics. And my colleague was having a similar layoff in another plant that we had in another location. A couple hours later, there's a lot of noise and, door comes open and and I'm in this other room and there's just all this shouting and yelling and not really sure what's going on. Turns out one of the terminated employees comes back and he's really upset and he's screaming and stuff. He has a loaded gun. We don't call the police. We just talk to him and remind him of his wife and young son. And, that goes away. We diffuse the situation without incident. So that was obviously one of the hardest days that I've had as an entrepreneur, but not the only one. You may have a day like that. I hope you don't, but you also may have days that look maybe not as extreme, but pretty tough. You may have one of your top employees come in and hand you her resignation just without notice. You may lose a large customer, which you're wondering how you're ever going to replace that revenue. You will miss revenue projections. You will miss bank projections. You will have bank default. You will probably be in default at some point on your bank line. You'll have software systems that don't work, bring your customers down. You'll have cybersecurity attacks. You may have an ERP system implementation that brings you to your knees. And you may have to fire someone that you've known for a long time. You may have a lawsuit that will not only drain your cash, but will drain all of your emotional energy. So Brian told me to make some inspirational remarks today. How I do? I feel like I'm nailing it. Yeah. Well, the reason I tell you that story is that day in Fort Wayne, Indiana was really a huge turning point in my life. It was maybe the turning point in my life. And I had 4 realizations that day. And I want to share these with you, whether you're an investor or whether you're thinking about going into it, these were things that I took away. Number one is, when you buy a business, you're not an investor, you're a leader. And I think my identity changed that day when I was in that conference room. And I'm glad that I went and did that myself, because, I wasn't able to hide behind a spreadsheet. When you own a business, you're accountable. And so I would encourage all of you to change your identity from, I'm the person who provides the capital. No, there's people's lives that are depending on you. The second realization that I had was, when I was on Wall Street, prior to starting my journey in entrepreneurship, we would build these models, and the models would have company A buying company B. And there was always a line in that model that said cost synergies. And, obviously there's cost synergies when company A buys company B a lot of time. Well, guess what? That day in Fort Wayne, Indiana, I realized cost synergies was a man who had to go home and tell his wife and young son that he no longer had a job. Or cost synergies was a woman who just walked out, didn't say anything, but had to wonder, how she was going to put food on the table or make rent. Which brings me to my third point, which is I resolved that I was never going to be a part of cost synergies again. I was going to devote my life to building companies. There's a lot of ways to make money in this world, and there's lots of ways you can cut costs on that, but that wasn't going to be something I was ever going to do again. I was going to devote my life to building companies, creating jobs, and as you heard in my intro, really build businesses through people. So that was a huge turning point for me. The fourth thing I realized that day was I was not a very good leader. Notwithstanding what I may have thought previously, I had a hard look in the mirror that day, and it's like, you're not very good at this. And so for the last 24 years, I've devoted myself to trying to become the best leader that I could. I've had an executive coach I've talked to every week for 15 years. I've consumed thousands and thousands of hours of content on the topic. I've listened to podcasts. I've had all kinds of coaches, taken courses. And then I've tried to also convey that content. So I teach, as was mentioned, I teach two classes at Stanford Business School, write a blog, and try to really become a student of leadership over that time. And that would be something I would also encourage all of you, because you are, like I said, everyone in this room, you are going to be a leader. So in the 26 years since I've been an entrepreneur and going through all that journey and all that learning, I wanted to share with you the three most important things that I learned that I think would be relevant for most people in this room. And then, Brian, we can talk about others as well, but these are the three takeaways. The first one I have is that, you got to do the thing that turns you on. And that sounds really obvious, but I see so many people who don't do this. I graduated and I had already started buying companies in my dorm room in Stanford Business School. And so I had this energy and this passion for what I wanted to do. But what I did instead, what maybe some of you do, is I made this expected value matrix. This is the risk adjusted probability of all these different things. And I went to what was the quote safe job. And let me tell you quickly about the safe job. The safe job, it turns out, isn't what you think. The safe job, I reported to someone who kind of didn't really want me to succeed. I reported to someone who told me where to be, what kind of deals to bid on, what hours I could work, what I should wear, what planes I had to get on. And if I had kids at that time, I would have still, even though I was doing the safe job and the thing I wasn't that excited about, I still would have missed Little League practices and been home late for dinner. So probably the truest thing I'm going to tell you today is something Buddha figured out 2,800 years ago, which is there's going to be suffering. No matter what you choose to do in this life, you're going to have suffering. It's why it stood the test of 2,800 years, because it's just true. So life is suffering, so choose something worth suffering for. Leadership is worth suffering for, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. The other thing about this expected value matrix that I was describing is it's just totally wrong. Your math is way off. And the reason is you're not factoring in what you're going to be like when you're at full power. When I worked in that safe job, part of me died. and the way that I showed up in that role versus how I showed up for the last 24 years, there's just no comparison. You will show up with superpowers when you're doing something you're excited about. And the reason for that is stress doesn't come from hard work. Stress comes from friction and tension. And when you're spending 8 hours a week doing something that you really aren't excited about, or maybe isn't even part of your value system, like that is stressful. So you will show up very differently. One question, of course, is what am I excited about? How do I figure that out? And so the best exercise that I've done with my students, and we'll do it really quickly, it'll take 1 minute, is imagine that a magical genie came out of a lamp. And the genie said, I'm not an all-powerful genie, so I can't give you any wish. But what I can give you is that whatever you throw yourself into with your life and your career, it's going to work out great. It's going to work out great. I'm going to grant you that wish. It's going to take longer than you think. It's going to be harder than you think. You're going to have ups and downs. But what would you wish for if you truly had that? And I would argue that's what you should be doing with your life. Principle one is do the thing that you're excited about. The second principle I have of my 3 is lengthen your time frame. This is something I see so many people make a mistake on. I don't know why, but we just sold this thing that everything's supposed to come quickly. And if it's not coming quickly, somehow we're failing or we're behind. Or look at what this other person's doing and they're ahead of me and I must be the wrong person. Or gosh, if I only would have started earlier, or I can't start now because I don't, because I wasted this time or whatever. But just chill out. I've cashed out, I calculated this the other day. I've cashed out over 500 entrepreneurs over the course of my career. So I've written a check and watched, and in those 500 data points, I've seen people start businesses, grow businesses, ultimately get them to a point where they're ready to sell. 500 times. 0 of those people did it quickly. 0. And even when it looked quick, it took only 7 years from the day they started the company, behind that was the 20 years of them building themselves and becoming the person that could do that in 7 years. So this does not happen quickly. The thing that also happens, this is for some of you who are maybe our students right now, is the people who will come to recruit on campus largely are going to be rewarding your individual contributor skills. You're going to get paid. So if you optimize for the first 2 years out of school, you're going to be optimizing for stuff you're kind of already good at. Investment banking, consulting, that sort of thing, because that's what they can pay you the most to do. Entrepreneurship, sorry to tell you this, you're going to not be good at it. You might suck at it, but you have a long time to get good at it, which is why you're not going to get paid that much in the early days. I had a friend, when I graduated, one of my really good friends, he went to a rival school and he became a convertible bond salesperson. It's great. And he optimized for that 1 year. Well, 24 years later, he knows how to short stocks, buy bonds, buy stocks, short bonds, and he can run a mean black Scholes. But let me tell you about 25 years in entrepreneurship, what you can learn. You can learn how to rally the troops when your business has had the worst quarter it's ever seen. You're going to learn how to hold people accountable, create plans, have difficult conversations. You're going to learn to create new product lines, create new services. You're going to learn how to hire and get people to join your cause and follow you. And you're going to unfortunately have to learn how to fire. You're going to raise capital. You're going to raise your employees' self-esteem. You're going to learn how to sell as though your life depends on it, because it does. You're going to sell employees when you really don't have money to pay them, and they're going to have to get excited about your vision. You're going to have to sell investors when you have no track record. They're going to have to sell customers when your new product that you really want to introduce isn't even ready, and they have to buy this one now so you have enough cash to keep going. But mostly you're going to have to sell yourself every morning, because you can't really see always the exact path, and you're going to have to sell yourself that just taking a step forward is going to get you there. But one of the biggest things I've learned in 25 years, if I had to summarize, is you're going to learn how to be able to use your imagination to envision a world that doesn't exist yet. I spend a tremendous amount of my time doing this, using your imagination to see the world as you want it to be first in your mind, and then bring that into reality through a group of people and through a group of employees. So that's what you can get in 25 years as a leader or an entrepreneur. Your goal is not to maximize your first year earnings out of school. Your goal is to maximize who you get to become as a result of the journey of your career. So extend your time frame and give yourself the benefit of having a lifelong love affair with your life and your career. Principle 2. My third and last principle is beware of the 2 most dangerous words in entrepreneurship. So I have been a lecturer or a case guest at Stanford for over 20 years now. And my favorite exercise to do with students is the one I just did with you, some version of what would you do if you knew you would not fail? We, in my classes, we actually spend an entire quarter really helping students get really clear on that. What is that thing you would do if you knew you wouldn't fail? Because that's, again, what I think you should do. So they get clear on it a lot of times. And in 20 years, no student has ever come up to me once and said, hey, Graham, you know what? I just give up. I'm not going to do this. I know exactly what I would do that I'm excited about, but nah, not going to do it. No student's ever said that to me. Instead, they say the 2 most dangerous words, which are not now. Not now. I'm going to do it. Not now. First, I gotta. And so give you another example of another classmate of mine. I'll change his name, call him Tim. So Tim and I graduated around the same time. At the same time I took my journey to entrepreneurship, Tim took the safe job. We have coffee one day. Graham, I hate this job. I'm out of here. My bonus comes in January. I'm out. Year later, got this another equity that's going to vest in December. Graham, freaking hate this job. I'm out of here. A year later, you know what? I'm getting married this year. And I'm just going to keep it chill. 2 years later, our first kid. 3 years later, private school. Number of years later, a mortgage. Number of years later, a new vested equity. 24 years later, still there. And it's sad. It's really sad because I know right now that if he could go back in time, he would have just taken the leap. The thing about entrepreneurship is that the path is less clear. I want to be, having a salary and a free lunch and a bonus, and a training program, it's clear and it's a well-worn path. And entrepreneurship is not, it's uncertain and it's going to feel that way. Like that's normal. And get out of your mind that there's not going to be this day where the clouds part and this ray of sun comes down to you and says, Graham, like that's just not how it feels. It's going to feel scary and it's going to feel early and it's going to feel unclear and uncertain. You're going to just have to have some faith. So beware of the 2 most dangerous words, not now. If you want to be a world-class entrepreneur, do the thing that turns you on, lengthen your time frame, and beware of the 2 most dangerous words. I used to think that I would have 2 careers, that I would start off and I'd be in the for-profit sector and I would go do all this great stuff. And then I would go actually contribute to the world and I'd start a nonprofit or do some social work or something like that. But I've come to change my mind and my thought on this. So Gallup recently did a poll where 70% of people in the United States dislike or actively dislike their jobs. And I have a close friend of mine, Kristen, who falls in that category. So imagine, Kristen goes to work and she hates her job and she's spending half her waking hours there. She doesn't feel valued. She doesn't work with people necessarily she likes and admires. She doesn't respect her boss. She's doing something she's not proud of or excited about. And she's working because she has to work. 70% of the people are like that. Well, think about what it's like to be Kristen's daughter or Kristen's son or Kristen's partner or sister or mother. So it's not just affecting her, it's affecting her whole community. And conversely, imagine you can change that as a leader. And you can. And now imagine Kristen comes home and she feels empowered at work. And she is like, she realizes what she does matters and her work has meaning. And she's connecting it to the vision of the company or something, a larger purpose that she can relate to. And she works with people she likes and trusts and admires. And she feels like she matters. And now what's it like to be in her community? What's it like to be her son or her daughter or her friend or her sister? So great leadership changes lives. It changes lives. And all of you have the opportunity to do that and to be part of that force now in the for-profit world. If you think of yourself that way, and if you think of yourself as leaders, and I made that change, 24 years ago from being this kind of mathematical investor to actually being a leader. You will get kicked in the teeth on the journey, but you will be able to change lives. So in summary, the 3 points again: do something that turns you on. Life has suffering, so figure out something that's worth suffering for. And when you're turned on, you will tap into superpowers that you didn't even know that you had. Number 2 is expand your time frame. You will spend very, very little of your life in the outcome of anything. You'll spend a fraction of a second in the outcome. You're going to spend your whole life in this pursuit and the journey. So give yourself something that you have a lifelong love affair with in this one precious life of yours. And finally, beware of the 2 most dangerous words, not now. It will always, always feel too early. It will always feel risky. It'll always feel like the right time. You'll feel like an imposter. You'll feel like it's not, you need more experience or whatever, and you don't. You just need to realize not now is fear in another form. I have good news and bad news about starting. The bad news is that no one else can give you permission to do this. There's no consultant, there's no parent or coach who can give you, ultimately you're the only one who can give you that permission. But the good news is that's the only permission that you really need. So give yourself permission to do the thing you want to do with this one life of yours. Extend your time frame and do it now. You did not come this far to play small. You came this far to have a dent in the universe. So begin it now, and good luck. Thanks. Thank you.